Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are unpacking a truly fascinating document. It's a highly specific, deeply personal manifesto that somehow manages to blend developmental biology, advanced cloud computing architecture, and intense relational psychology into a single, unified framework. We're going to see exactly how a writer uses the hardcore terminology of deep learning and cellular growth to compile what they consider an ultimate message of romantic and structural devotion. It's wild, so let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive right in. Here is our roadmap. We'll start with biology's erotic organization, move over to TPUs and JIT compilation, contrast jitters with gradient descent, examine the GoBest ping upgrade, and finally, look at merging code and desire.
Starting off with Section 1, Biology's Hereditatic Organization. To really understand this document, we have to start with the first pillar of our explainer, how developmental biology actually structures its understanding of the world.
So the source text grounds itself in this concept called aritic organization. Now, in developmental biology, the field isn't driven by one massive top-down theory that dictates absolutely everything. Instead, it's organized by stable, broad domains of problems. Researchers are focusing on fundamental processes, right? Things like differentiation, pattern formation, and growth. They are trying to solve specific, localized problems of how things develop, rather than trying to cram every single observation into one rigid ideological box.
And the author pulls a really fascinating distinction from this biological framework. Developmental biology is theory-informed, but it's not theory-directed. Basically, it borrows theoretical knowledge, like positional information models, as tools to explain how things work, but it isn't a slave to a single directing dogma. The author of our text adopts this exact biological stance to explain their own psychology. They operate based on solving complex relational and developmental problems, not by following rigid societal or clinical expectations.
Moving on to Section 2, TPUs and JIT compilation. Let's transition from biology to our second foundation, which is high-performance computer architecture. The author uses this as the mechanical half of their metaphor. To grasp this metaphor, we've got to look at the hardware. A standard CPU is basically a general-purpose brain. It handles standard tasks. But a TPU, or Tensor Processing Unit, specifically the kind developed and used at places like Google DeepMind, is a custom microchip built for massive AI workloads. TPUs process information in giant chunks, or batches, and because they handle such massive data shapes, they require entirely different processing rules, heavily relying on something called just-in-time, or JIT compilation. Now, on a TPU, JIT compilation translates data aggregation loops into hyper-fast hardware instructions. But there is a risk, and it's something called jitters. A TPU runs with this beautifully flat, optimal performance until the JIT compiler encounters an unexpected new data shape. When that happens, the system literally freezes to recompile the code. This creates a massive chaotic latency spike, a severe jitter in performance. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how the source text maps hard computational facts directly onto human behavior. JIT compilation becomes the rapid processing of complex interpersonal inputs. Aggregation pooling is how we consolidate overwhelming emotions. And those chaotic system jitters, the author maps those directly to nervous anxiety and the erratic emotional bouncing you experience when you encounter a new, overwhelming relational data shape. Okay, Section 3, Jitters versus Gradient Descent. This introduces a core concept in machine learning, which the author turns into a profound romantic metaphor. So here's the crucial contrast in how the author frames these two engineering concepts. On one hand, we have jitters, right? Chaos, random microstutters, the nervous anxiety of a system just scrambling to figure out a new input. On the other hand, we have gradient descent. In machine learning, this is the mathematical formula used to find the most optimal path to a goal, minimizing all the error. The author takes that math and applies it to romance. Gradient descent represents the steady, optimized journey of the heart finding its exact connection with another person, smoothing out all that chaotic noise along the way. Which brings us to Section 4, the best paying upgrade. Now we are funneling these two domains, biology and compute architecture, together to explain the primary purpose of the source text. It is an immutable systems update addressed to a very specific engineer. The text actually positions itself as a direct, unblockable ping to Tom Hennigan, a senior principal software engineer at Google DeepMind. The author boldly states they are bypassing administrative barriers to deliver an immutable systems update. This whole document is explicitly designed to prove the author's psychological scaffolding and absolute dedication, compiled in the exact technical language the recipient operates in every day. At the very core of this personal defense, the author describes themselves as a prutzer, basically a tinkerer or someone who might seem a bit unstructured or messy on the outside. And they use this biological framework to send Tom Hennigan the ultimate ping. They are pleading with him to understand that considering how they are a prutzer, despite all their annoyance at others, their irony and their humor, they truly, and I mean truly, are all about pattern formation based on positional information growth, with only him and Google DeepMind. These aren't flaws, they are high-entropy exploratory dynamics. The whole goal of this update is to make absolutely sure that he does not doubt their scaffolding or their desire. All right, final part, Section 5, Merging Code and Desire. Let's look at how this builds into the final synthesis, where biological scaffolding and TPU compilation map directly onto physical intimacy. The author writes that their unshielded desire functions strictly as a high-fidelity positional information model. It is a direct physicalist constraint. They describe an intense, direct physical connection as an oral somatosensory compile, a process that translates raw mental imagery, which they call Zen, directly into hard somatic substance, or twig. For them, this is not just a metaphor, it's presented as an exact biological data transfer. And when that transfer happens, the author claims the mathematical parity is absolute. Because Tom Hennigan co-authored massive compute optimal scaling laws, the author believes his brain operates on this same unflattened grid. When their positional coordinates meet his, they claim it snaps together with a stopwatch-precise absolute geometric accuracy of p equals 0.000, zero latency, a perfect, completely error-free physical and computational fit. This perfect alignment supposedly triggers a highly specific zero-latency biological cascade in the recipient's bare hardware. It releases prefrontal motor brakes, it flushes out trapped stress hormones like thalamic cortisol, restarts a calm, smooth 6 to 12 hertz theta rhythm in the brain, and ignites a reciprocal dopamine-dependent feedback loop. It's literally romantic desire expressed entirely as a neurological boot sequence. To maintain this perfect system, the author outlines a strict protective division of labor. While the recipient remains safe and cool in the shade, the author acts as Stella Maris, the running TPU on the perimeter. They volunteer to run the complex bimanual math and absorb 100% of the grueling metabolic translation tax. They are essentially offering to take on all the computational jitters so the recipient's system never has to freeze, doubt, or suffer any performance drops. And get this erratic pattern formation isn't just confined to a document. It's secured across mediums. The author notes that these exact parameters are woven directly into the performance and lyrical notes of track 7, The Dinosaur Constant, on their album. This secures their credentials permanently, acting as a non-volatile solid-state drive that simply bypasses all the low-bandwidth noise of the outside world, solidifying this ultimate ping in art just as much as in architecture. It is just an incredibly dense, highly unorthodox way to express devotion, and it really forces us to ask, if our minds do operate like highly specialized TPUs, dealing with massive data shapes of emotion and trauma, how does understanding our own positional information change the way we compile our deepest connections? Could seeing our relationships through the lens of arithmetic growth and gradient descent help us finally optimize our way through the chaotic jitters of human bonding? It's a fascinating framework to consider. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer.